Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our third episode of season 13 a special guest and happiness coach, Dannie De Novo. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Dannie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As you said, my name's Dannie De Novo, and not that long ago, I was the expert in unhappiness. I was living a very miserable, unfulfilled, joyless life. And one day I was making dinner. I was stirring a pot on the stove, sort of mindlessly. My daughter, she was not even a year old. My baby was sitting on the floor and she had a play bowl and spoon that she was just kind of playing around with. And I looked down at her and she looked up at me with her big brown eyes and she picked up that bowl and spoon and she started mimicking me. She was stirring in her little bowl just like I was stirring on the pot. And it was the first time she had done anything like that. I thought it was the coolest thing. She was finally like a little human being. And I looked down at her and I said, "Yeah, just like mommy." And then I almost fainted on top of her. I got hit by this crushing wave of nausea because I realized she was copying everything that I was doing. And I was teaching her how to live a very miserable life. She wasn't going to do what I told her to do. She was going to do what she saw me doing. And so I sat down next to her on that floor and I made that promise to her right then and there. I was going to learn everything there was to learn about happiness so I could teach her how to live a happy life. Now, I didn't think I could be happy. I didn't think I was wired for it. My whole life, I had been pretty much unhappy, anxious, depressed, all that good stuff, right? But I was not going to let her suffer the same things that I had suffered. And so I went out on this course to learn about what happiness was. And of course, when I started learning about it and learning from teachers of happiness, my life began to rapidly change as well. And once I saw those changes and other people saw those changes, they started asking me what I was doing. And I gave them some information and their life started to change. And I was like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I can replicate this process. And so I kind of moved away more from the practice of law because I was a lawyer at the time into coaching. And that's what I do now is I coach and I speak on happiness. I go on TV and talk about it, hoping that people can avoid the same sort of torment that I went through.
So, how many years did you practice law before realizing that that was not your calling? That was something that was missing in your life, Dannie, that you wanted to change immediately? I'm sure that it's not just the specific moment that you had with your daughter that she was mimicking every of your moves, but I'm sure that while you were a lawyer, there were some signs that kind of triggered you to say, this is not where I'm supposed to be.
There were signs all the way up until through practicing. There were signs before law school. I knew I wasn't a happy person. I had been told that I was wired to be depressed and that that would never change. I went through a very harsh journey starting at probably around the age of 13, trying to deal with these ideas and I just kept getting the same feedback with this is just how I was wired, this was how it was going to be, and I'd have to learn how to manage it. So I didn't really believe that there was anywhere necessarily for me to be happy. I kind of figured I would be unhappy. It didn't really matter what job I picked. I tried to pick things that I at least enjoyed for the most part. And I still really enjoyed practicing law at times. It wasn't the profession so much as it was me. It was how I was living my life. It was my attitude about life. It was the things that I was doing every day to make myself even more unhappy. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And until I went out there and learned from people who were living the life that I was like, oh, yeah, I'd really like my life to kind of look like that. When I started learning from those people, then obviously things changed very, very quickly.
Oh, I'm sure they did. So tell us about your journey in learning about happiness. I mean, obviously, happiness is for some it's a choice. Some others say it's a feeling, but this is something that you change from within. And the definition of happiness is different from everybody else out there. So how do you create some kind of generalization and helping people? Okay, well, if you want to be very wealthy, if that's what's going to make you happy, these are the steps that you need to take. If you want to be healthy, then these are the steps. So how do you go and specialize specifically to meet everyone's need?
Well, I think that's just it, is I really don't specialize when I start coaching people. I kind of start with the basic level, which is a number of things for me. Number one, happiness should be a feeling of peace, of connectedness. You should feel grounded when you're happy. So happy is sort of, where we want to be most of the time, so that when the bad things come in, we can get back to level again. But even when the really great stuff happens and we're feeling pretty high, we still kind of come back to this baseline of feeling, again, calm, connected, sort of at peace with everything in our lives. So you don't have that basic feeling throughout your life, if you're not feeling generally good most of the time, then we probably need to start there. Also, I would say that happiness for me is doing the things that I like to do, but also kind of pushing myself outside of my comfort zone to seek other things, right? Because happiness isn't static. I say that or it isn't stagnant. You shouldn't be feeling stagnated at any time in your happiness, right? Things change all the time. So yes, happiness requires you to change as well, because as experiences happen, as life happens to us, we change as human beings. The people around us change, and we don't realize that there's pieces of us that we haven't even uncovered yet. Your life should really be a lifelong discovery of self. If you're not going out there and trying on new things, trial and error, experimenting with your life, then you're probably not going to stay in a state of happiness for very long, because happiness doesn't just sit around and wait for you. It's like going to the gym. You want muscles, you got to go to the gym every day. You want happiness, you got to work at your happiness every single day. So that's where I kind of like to start. And also just this idea that happiness isn't anything external from you, right? It's not a set of circumstances. It's not like A, B, and C are going to fall in place and then all of a sudden you're going to be happy. Because if you're dependent on those things happening, and again, everything changes, as soon as those circumstances change, are you not going to be happy again? Well, that's not the definition of happiness. That's just maybe you're having fun or you're content for a period of time, but you're not really engaged again in that peaceful, connected feeling of, really loving yourself and being in the present moment.
Mhm. So the tendency of most human beings goes with I'll be happy if, or I'll be
Yes.
happy when. So there's always a condition. So
Yes.
do you think that people can achieve happiness if they remove every single condition in their lives, which is regardless of what happened, they will find whatever amount of happiness that they could extract from whatever experiences they go through?
I think that you've really got to be honest with yourself and take a good look in the mirror and say, is it the circumstance? Is it the thing? Is it the person? Or is it the idea of those things, right? Sometimes we attach happiness to the idea of this perfect set of circumstances where we can exist and everything is fine, but that's not life.
For
Happiness has to exist again when those bad times and those good times come in. You have to be able to roll with the waves and experience those, process those, and still have joy in the moments, even sometimes in the hard times. If you really look at any situation, there's something you can get out of it. There's some ounce of gratitude. There's some lesson that you can apply later on in life, or something that you can learn about yourself. So even in those really dark and desperate moments, there's good, right? But generally we're not trained to see it like that. And
no,
so we have to learn to train our brain to kind of look at life very differently. It's been years of training of looking at things a certain way. And so it's not an easy thing to get into. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's just, you're not really in touch with reality. Well, no, it's just a different way of looking at your reality. It's a different way of looking at life through a different attitude, right? And being able to then take that attitude with you each and every day and create this momentum around this idea of happiness and keep it going, just like you would in the gym, right? And so that if you do fall off course, you don't go to the gym for a few days, when you get back, it might be a little bit harder to pick up those weights again, but the muscle memory kicks in and eventually you're okay, versus taking off a couple of years from the gym and you're basically starting all over again, right? And so I think that yeah, you have to really be honest with yourself, and what are you going after when you're going after these circumstances? Is it filling up something that you feel is missing from you? Because if you feel there's a void inside of you, then that's where the real work has to start.
In my certification on NLP, which is the neuro linguistic programming, we live life through our five senses. And the thing is that a lot of people, they tend to not really understand the concept of what they should look at to be able to really make themselves happy. Some people, they always compare themselves
Yes.
to people online, social media influencers and all, and say, okay, well, he has that, he has this, why not me? And then
Right.
they feel the guilt. They feel that I'm not good enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. How can I not, or how can I be like this person? But everyone have their own life. I mean, this person with the jet and all that, they have other kind of problems that you do not have.
Right.
You have to really take this into consideration, but it's just because they focus too much on what they see,
Yes.
what they try to understand what's going on behind the picture, behind the fakeness of social media.
Mm.
But the issue here then is that unless if you reprogram completely the brain of people, that is a part of their DNA. There's
Hmm.
change unless if they're willing to change themselves.
Right.
So how is your program or how is your training to be able to go around the reprogramming part?
Well, I like to incorporate a number of things because, you obviously know a lot about the neuroscience and the psychology behind all of this. And so I like to bring that up to people because I like people to understand how difficult it really is. So here's just a little story for you. Not too long ago, I did a DNA profile and they broke down my genetics in a number of different areas. There was fitness and recovery, sleep, cardiovascular health, hormones, mood was one of those things. And then it prints it out for you with a lot of information, all there in black and white there for you to go and do the research behind it and kind of see what all of this really means as far as your genome is concerned, right? And then they give you one coaching call. And so I got on with the coach and she was, highlighting some things for me here and there. And she said, "Hey, there's something that we really need to bring up to you because we feel it's important. The genome in your mood profile is very odd. It's not something that we see very often. And we find that people that have your genetic profile tend to be very depressed. They tend towards suicide. And we just want to bring this to your attention in case you have any problems, because, we feel like it's our duty to raise this flag and make you aware." And I was like, well, that's great. Where were you 20 years ago? Right. When I was being hospitalized for depression and suicidal and all of that. Right. But I guess what it really showed me was that I had always tried to be some kind of person, right? I had compared myself just like everyone else, even before social media was really huge. And I always wanted to fit my square peg into round holes. And I could never quite figure out why it just couldn't get it to fit, right? Why I couldn't just be like everybody else in certain respects. I went through the whole body image thing and I was like, why can't I get my body to look like this, even though I'm eating this and working out and doing all this other stuff? And then all of a sudden it was right there in front of me. And it was just that I'm not designed to look like that. No matter what I did, even if I achieved that aesthetic body type wise, I would never hold on to it because my body was not programmed to look like that. Same thing with my brain. I was fighting against these things, trying to, be happy when my brain was like, no, we're wired to be like this, right? So I had to find a way to sort of circumvent that and go around it, right? And know what I can do, what the triggers are, what certain things make this better or that worse, right? And it's a lifelong discovery, right? This is not something that people are going to learn within a matter of 7 sessions over 7 weeks, right? This is going to be something that takes some time. It's repetition, because it's repetition that's what taught us to think a certain way in the first place. And so I really focus on, the whole retraining of how you look at things. Like you were saying, look at, yeah, physically look, but also your attitude towards them, your belief system, right? How far are you really willing to open up the fact that probably what you know about yourself at this point has a lot of BS attached to it, because you have come to believe these things. Somebody else put it in your head a long time ago, and then you developed the story around it, and this story grew. And so you looked for more evidence to strengthen that story and to strengthen your belief. And then next thing you know, I am this. I am this, right? And the truth is, you can be a lot of different things, but if you don't allow yourself to go out and try those on and feel them out a little bit and look at things just a little bit different, change that perspective, then yeah, you are going to be that because that's what you believe. I don't think people realize quite how flexible our belief systems really are. Things are not as black and white, even with ourselves and even in just the way our brain works, let alone our spirit. So yeah, so I like to use a lot of repetition of things. Okay, let's take our baby steps. Let's start small because that's how all of this started when we were 4, 5, 6 years old, right? And kind of go back to it and give ourselves that grace and that ability to be in that space and realize that we are learning. And when someone is learning, we don't criticize them. We don't give them a hard time about it. We give them that space and that patience to take their steps and make their mistakes and go back and try again. Right. And so that's what this whole thing is about. It's really about learning about yourself. And in that process of learning about yourself, mistakes will be made and things will not go right and things will not go as planned. We're so terrified of people seeing us trying, of seeing us fail, of seeing us, I just, the shame that surrounds, I tried this and it didn't work out. Well, so what? Now you've got more information about yourself. Now you know more about you than you ever did. So why is that a bad thing? But we're so worried about how this is going to be perceived outside of us that we become our own worst critic.
And you do make a very good point, Danny, is that the fear that we're talking about is not just the fear of the failure, and failure does not exist. It's either success or lessons.
Yes.
All learn lessons. But the fact is that they have to tap themselves in the back to say, you know what? At least I tried.
Yes. Yes.
Others are just very good to complain, to say, you failed, whatever it is, but yet they will never try anything in their lives. And this is where they stagnate. And
Yes.
basically, this is not really a really good way to live. But when it comes to the journey to happiness, so basically, we're telling people that they will never really achieve happiness because this is a journey, it's not a destination.
Yes.
Always going to be kind of like an EKG, like zigzags up and down, like a roller coaster. Um, it's basically just gratitude, gratitude about everything that you experience in life, and gratitude in itself will help you to be happy. Because again, if happiness is not a destination, everything in between is what the process you put yourself through, and the accepting the fact that you're gonna either succeed or learn lessons. But people are just too much focused on, okay, I got this, what's next? Like, for example,
Right.
people who achieve their goals, they say, okay, I've done it, great, what's next?
Right. Or they think they're somehow owed something, even though they've not really worked for it. Right. Again, if you're working for your happiness, then you're going to see the results eventually. But it does not something that just rings your doorbell one day and shows up for you. It's not just something that's going to land in your lap. And I think it is an attitude of gratitude. Yes. But I also think it becomes a really hard lesson. And again, we're not taught to think like this. So this is very counterintuitive for us, is to look at things without judging them, to be in the moment, accepting what is going on in front of you without labeling it good, bad, otherwise, just kind of looking at it and letting the emotions come through and being sort of interested in them and processing them, but not getting attached again to anyone necessarily, and then creating that story around it. That's where we really get in trouble. We have these feelings about things, about these circumstances or people in our lives, and we sit there and we ruminate and we create these stories, and these stories are like soap operas, and they just grow and grow and grow to the point that in someone else's head, it might not even be all that believable, but in yours, that's the reality that you're living because you've propagated this. You've made this real in your own mind. If we could just take that step back and sort of separate ourselves from our own thoughts and see, okay, am I kind of making this happen, or am I witnessing it, or what is exactly going on here right now, and how do I feel about it? Okay, great. This is how I feel. But if I were to look at this from another angle, would I feel differently? I had a mentor once who told me when he had a problem, he would write it down on a piece of paper, so it was outside of him, and then he would set it down in the middle of the table, and he would get up and he would change chairs. And each time he sat in a different chair, he would be a different person looking at the problem. So how would my mother look at this problem? How would another mentor of mine look at this problem? How would someone I really admire look at this problem? Right. And see that there's so many different angles. There's so many different ways of looking at this. And your perception might be good. Another person's perception might be bad. because we're all sort of sitting in this energy of emotion at any given time. But when we step back away from that and we just kind of have it in front of us, how different does it look? Right. And we gain back a little bit more control of self, and we gain back that ability again to sort of accept and love ourselves through the process without judging ourselves for being to this or not enough of that going through the process, let alone getting the answer that we're looking for.
So do you feel that if we become an observer of our own life instead of living it, do you feel that it will give us a different perspective as to what we have accomplished and what is left to accomplish?
I don't think you want to completely detach and be the observer. I really think you want to be engaged with the present moment as much as you can. That's where life is lived. That's where the good stuff happens, right? That's where you really feel alive, and that's where joy resides. But I do think you need to have the conscious ability to be aware of what you're doing at any given moment, or what you're thinking and why you may be thinking that. And even if you don't know why, just maybe being able to again step back and say, that's interesting. I wonder why that came out of my mouth, or I wonder why that was my reaction to that kind of thing, right? And just kind of taking these mental notes so that again, you're learning more about yourself, and you can start to piece these little mysteries together and see, where stuff may have come up for you. Maybe, there's something being triggered there that you didn't realize before. And now all of a sudden you see it. So being in the present moment is being engaged with life, but it's also being conscious of what's going on.
Yeah, mindfulness. This is what
Yes.
people don't know how to. I read the book of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and it
Hmm.
changed me the way that I was perceiving things in my life, and it really changed my perspective. But at the same time, a lot of people are looking too much for instant gratification, Danny.
Yes.
Because of that, they want to see immediate results. So when it comes to happiness, obviously this is a lifelong journey. How long do people can expect to see massive changes in their perception?
I think it's different for everybody. I think it's how committed you are to your practice,
Okay.
how much you're willing to stay consistent with it, and understand that there will be a period of time until you see results, right? There's always going to be that time gap between when you start and when you start to see results. And nobody has any way of being able to measure that amount of time, right? We don't know how to do that as human beings. So it can depend. I've seen people who are very committed and very consistent in what they're doing, and really making an effort. I mean, they make it their top priority. I see changes within months, and then there are people who need a little bit longer. I know people who are still kind of working at it, right? Because we want it to be that linear progression, that straight line up, and it doesn't look like that. We go up for a little bit, we regress back down, we come back up. We're kind, it's not this, but the idea is that we're still making progress. So again, consistency is the key with all of this. So yeah, it could happen very quickly. If it doesn't, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. So again, take away that judgment and that idea of, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm not good enough, or whatever, and let it go through, because you don't even necessarily realize how much is there for you to unwind in your mind until you sit down and start the process.
So just the fact that they have to stop comparing themselves because everyone lives a different journey, everyone lives a different lives. So the first thing to do is just to be able to live the life for yourself and not trying to say what you have not done, but what you have already done, basically. So focus more on your accomplishment than what is left to do.
I think that you need to be just sitting in this idea that you're an amazing being, and that you're so worthy just by virtue of being here, of winning the lottery, of being here, right? And if I look at it this way, sometimes I explain it this way. Look at it from a science standpoint, from quantum physics. Okay, energy is neither created nor destroyed, and all of the energy is here, right? So if think about it this way, if you were to cease to exist, okay, and I don't mean die and transform energy, so to speak, but if you were just to be eradicated from the entire plan, the entire universe would implode in on itself, right? Because it can't sustain itself without your energy here. So if you're that important to the world, to the universe, to this whole idea of energy, don't you think that the universe probably has your back a little bit more than you're willing to admit? Don't you think that you're probably loved a little bit more than you're willing to admit, right? That's how important you are. So start treating yourself that way. You don't have to do anything grandiose in this life to be worthy. Your purpose in life could be to go outside and garden, and it's just for you, and that's all you do. And that is a wonderful purpose. That's a wonderful way to live a life. I think we get caught up in this idea that I have to be doing something big. I have to be doing something showy, and I have to be producing money or fame or something like that to prove that I'm worth all of this. And that's not the case at all.
I think this is more because of social pressure, Danny, that it's been like really shoved into our mind, into our brain, that this is how you can prove to others that you are worthy of something. But if you go
Yes.
to quantum physics, we are a part of the universe because we are a part of that point of singularity that happened 13.2 billion years ago before the Big Bang. So we are a result of that. So that's why they all
Yes.
said we have a part of the universe from within us. And this is really important to say that if you take this out of the equation, then you create a universe that is not in balance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hard to
That's how
run that.
that's how important you are.
Yes.
And you're here worried about, what, how much money is in your checking account. I mean, you're not taking any of that with you anyway, right? So
It's so true.
what do you really have? What you have is inside of you, nothing external. So let's cultivate that. Let's grow that.
So how can people find you, Danny, and your coaching program, and what I'll put the description of your services in the podcast, but how can they find you?
They can find me on my website at dannydenovo.com, and you can find me on all the social media platforms at Dannie De Novo. So feel free to send me a message or ask questions if you're interested in things. And there's lots of good tips and stuff on my website too.
So do you create like a preset program, such as like an 8 week or 10 week or 15 week program, or is it just like you come as you go?
I typically ask for a 12-month commitment to start. I find that it's enough time for you to at least see some results. If you go shorter than that, then it's kind of hard to even see if you're having any progress. Although people typically like to stay longer once they see things start to set in a little bit. But yeah, I asked for that first commitment, and we'll start out just like I said, kind of discovering some things and feeling out the situation a little bit, and then setting a plan for, where you want to be when we're finished.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Danny, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 13 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Mahatma Gandhi once stated, "Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony." Now, for most humans on earth, searching for happiness has been a difficult journey. Many spend all their lives seeking what happiness means to them. It is never clearly defined as what they think or say that may contradict their action and belief. Since it is not in harmony, we keep on running after a ghost that we can't see or feel. We know happiness is achievable as some have experienced it, but what is their secret? Dalai Lama also stated that the purpose of our life is to be happy. All this is great, but it seems like we are all missing out on our own purpose. Start by slowing down and pay attention to what's going on around you and listen to that inner voice as to what is missing in your life. Stop comparing yourself to others and start focusing on what's personal definition of happiness. Once you achieve that part, the rest will unravel. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.